Okay, so before we start, I'll just do a brief introduction of yourself. But before that, I'd like to welcome everybody to this online session. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we'll be discussing our manuscript. We all know how important it is as students of UTP to be able to publish because it's one of the graduation requirements, and we know it's also important if you want to be in academia to have as much publication as possible. So today we'll be discussing our manuscript from the other side. I mean, every time we all discuss it from our own side, how we're writing it and all of those things. But we'll be discussing it from the reviewer side, the one we rarely get to hear about. But before we start that, I'm going to invite Anwar to give us the opening prayer.
All right. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma qfir lana dhunubana wa li ikhwanina alladhina sabaquna bil iman wa la taj'al fi qulubina ghillan lil ladhina amanu rabbana innaka ra'ufun rahim. سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. We gather today to express gratitude upon your greatest gift toward us. In conjunction with this event, we ask for your help and guidance. Ya Allah, kindly give us strength and courage to face the struggle and to find and gain knowledge. Kindly bestow blessing, physical and spiritual health, fitness of mind, peace of mind, strength of spirit. Ya Allah, give strength to our lecturers, teachers, and our leaders to continue to serve for people, society, nation, and religion. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for that dua. So before we start, I would like to read out a few rules to the participants. So that we can have a very well conducted session. So I would advise everyone, please mute your mic and your video. If you're going to be in the session, please make sure your video and your mic is on mute so that our speaker can have the center stage and we do not want distraction. However, while we're going on, the speaker would have some part where he would want us to contribute. If you contribute, please raise your hand, and then once there is need, you will be called upon to unmute your mic, please. If you want to say anything, or if the speaker needs us to say anything, please just raise your hand and you'll be asked to unmute. Until then, please remain mute and your video off. Also, for the final stage of the presentation, there'll be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please do not unmute. Just drop your questions in the chat box. Please do not unmute. Put your questions in the chat. Now we are giving our questions. Let us be as straightforward and concise as possible. This will help us to answer the question easier and faster. Also, once again, I'm moderating. All the questions should come in the chat box. Please switch off your audio and your video. So, I believe we have all done that. Now that we have done that, I would like to welcome Dr. Kashif. Before I move on, I will do a brief introduction. So, Kashif Uzain is our lecturer for today, and he received his BSc from Mehran University of Engineering and Technology in Pakistan in 2006. And he got his master's and PhD in the same discipline, University Tun Hussein in Malaysia. That was 2015 and 2018 respectively. And since then, he has spent 7 years in the industry as a software engineer in companies, in different companies in Pakistan. After his PhD, he moved to China for his postdoc research. Since 2019, Doctor has been a postdoctoral researcher with the Institute of Fundamental and Frontier University of Electronic Science and Technology of China, Chengdu, China. So his major research interests include machine learning, optimization, fuzzy neural networks, and meta-heuristic algorithms. And of course, as a reviewer, he has published several high-impact journals. presented his research in several international conferences, Malaysia, China, Singapore, Brunei, Darussalam, Thailand, etc. And also is currently a reviewer and a member of the editorial committee of several top journals and conferences. So inshallah, Dr. Hussein will be giving us an introduction or insight into what the reviewer is looking at when they're going through our manuscript, and probably give us some of the things we need to put in place and some of the things we need to pay attention to that otherwise we would not know. Dr. Kashi, you're welcome. Please.
Thank you very much, Ms. MC and UTP Graduate Research Organization for inviting me for this session. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, for sharing my thoughts and my knowledge on reviewing a paper. Basically, today we are going to talk about, also thanks to all the participants for joining the session. I'm so glad that there is a good number of our young researchers who are actively looking forward to learn some important elements of a manuscript, and hopefully they will be publishing in good journals in their research journey. So today, basically, we are going to talk about your manuscript from a reviewer's perspective. My name is Kashif Hussain, as mentioned already by the MC. I'm doing my postdoc in University of Electronic Science and Technology of China in China. Please note down my email address. It's useitsoft@hotmail.com, so that we can communicate after this session for any thing related to research writing, publications, and etc. Please note down that most of the material presented in this research in these slides is basically taken from Publons Academy. Recently, I did a course on Publons Academy on reviewers. On reviewers. So basically, I'm now a certified reviewer from Publons Academy. So what I learned from there, I would like to now share with you that what did they taught me as a reviewer, and now I'm going to tell you that what really other researchers are going to see in your research paper, in the manuscript that you have already submitted to a journal. So it will be both my personal experience as a reviewer, my personal experience as a writer, author, and my knowledge that I gained from these certifications. So this is how, just a little bit profile. I have reviewed several journals and conferences that include neurocomputing, artificial intelligence in medicine, artificial intelligence review. These are all mostly Q1 journals. Some other journals including like Middle East Journals of Management and then International Journal of Swarm Intelligence Research. And I have also been actively participating in some conferences as a committee member. I have around 40 publications, over 200 citations, and Chindex in ResearchGate, I have over 20,000 people have read my papers, and over 150 researchers have recommended my work. I have successfully published in journals including Neurocomputing and Applications, Artificial Intelligence Review, Expert System with Applications, and all these. So this is, you can say, although I have not as many publications as those already established researchers in different fields, but as a young researcher, I can say I have quite ample experience to share with my friends. So today what we are going to cover in our talk is important elements of a manuscript. So in this title, look what are those elements that we should focus on, and then some important things that we should be, considering when we are writing our manuscript. So we will also see some strengths and weaknesses of a manuscript. Then we will also talk about writing a convincing manuscript, convincing for the reviewers, convincing for the journal editors, and also convincing for the readers in the end when it is published. So we will also discuss how we can minimize our chances of rejection. So there is always a chance of rejection because there are multiple reviewers in a journal. For example, there are like uh, double blind review system. They have like two reviewers, minimum 2 to 4 reviewers. So every reviewer has his own thoughts. So there can be conflicting, comments, and it's our job to minimize those chances by whatever we can do on our end. So we will also learn in the end how to respond to reviewers' comments. So when we before I would like to start my presentation, I would like participants to please note down on their papers a few bullet points that you are expecting from a reviewer. Please note down those bullet points on your paper. I give you 2 minutes time to note down uh, all those things that you expect from a reviewer. So in the end, we will try to reconcile what we expect and what the reviewers expect from you. So please, now on, I give you 2 minutes time to write down what you have, what are the expectations do you have from the reviewers? What do you want reviewers to do with your papers? So please write down these a few bullet points that we can later on you can share with me. So we go ahead, we proceed with our slides. Uh, as a reviewer, I have already reviewed a lot of papers for many journals, so it's not an easy process. Reviewing a paper is not an easy process. It's a responsibility. It's you can say it's a job. It's a full-time job. When you have a paper for review, you have to understand so many things that you have written on your paper. So there are multiple rounds of review that a reviewer puts on your paper. So at the first glance, basically a reviewer would like to go using a 4-step approach. So in the first step, those 4 steps could be like initially having a broader read throughout the paper. You can say a bird eye view of the paper, and then a reviewer would like to know more detail by doing a first detailed read. Maybe today he would just simply overlook just broadly look at the paper. Tomorrow he will probably read some more detail. Then after tomorrow he will read some other details. Depending on the time that a reviewer has. Those reviewers are already appointed somewhere doing some job. So this is the voluntary activity that they are doing. So they would do it, step by step, to make themselves clear what they are going to evaluate. Then in the end, after second detailed review, they would be able to write some comments on the paper. So to familiarize themselves with the paper, they would first read abstract. They would first read, of course, the title, then abstract. Then after reading the abstract, they would see the headings and subheadings, means sections and subsections and the structure of the paper. They would like to familiarize with them, with the paper, with how the paper is written. and its writing style. What is the writing style? Is it passive? Is it active? Is it, there are different writing styles. So different authors have different, for example, if you see Europeans have different, Americans have different, we Asians have different writing styles. So it depends. They would like to familiarize with the writing style of the paper so that they are, you know, uh, read the paper in a good sequence. So they would also like to see some figures and tables to know what is demonstrated, what is presented in the paper. So this is basically first look. So as a writer, as an author, I would like to more focus on those things that the reviewer is going to see first, because it is the first thing that the reviewer will make his decision, initial decision. He's not going to see you, he's not going to see your work, he still doesn't know much detail of the work, but initially if it is quite attractive, quite sensible, quite nicely written things, making the reviewer to like your paper, to understand your paper so that he can dive deeper into your paper for further details, because he doesn't have much time. At this stage, if he finds the paper is written poorly, then he will straight away reject. He will not go for first detailed read, second detailed read, and other steps. So this is the first impression. So it as always said that the first impression is the last impression. So your first impression is your title, is your abstract, is your structure of the paper, headings, subheadings, figures, and tables. So put your more focus on all those things. When you have written your paper, you need to recheck whether all these things are good enough that will make your reviewer to read further. Okay. In the first detail view, when a reviewer has now found that the paper has something important, something good that he can go through further, now he would like to see originality and overall quality. It's very important that your paper should present originality. What do we mean by originality? It means that it is not citing a lot of papers. It is not citing already published research. It is also talking about itself. It's talking about something that you have done in your research. Sometimes we see the papers that mostly talk about previous research. They don't have their own views, their own thoughts, their own comments, their own observations, their own findings. So originality is shown by your own contribution, okay? And the overall quality. Overall quality is, of course, reading by it's a quality of presentation, quality of structure, quality of language. If a reader finds that the language is quite nice, quite clear, quite easy to understand, that he is encouraged to read further. It's very, very important that a reviewer is encouraged to read your paper further, because if he is discouraged by any of the wrong elements in your paper, he will straight away refuse. Okay. So we want the reader, a reviewer, to read our paper thoroughly, then try to give us some comments. So the important thing is originality, overall quality, and readability. Readability is very important. For a reviewer, he is supposed to read all the paper. He is supposed to read all the paper. So it's not easy, like 20 pages, 40 pages, sometimes 50 pages paper is there. Review papers are quite lengthy. So it's not easy to read all those 20, 40 pages at once. So they would read step by step, day by day, whenever they they have some time to do so. So they basically now try to see whether there are main questions. Are there main questions? So what are the main questions in a reviewer's mind that are answered in the paper? What are the main concerns in a reviewer's mind that are answered, that are addressed in the paper? So these are the first observations. I hope you understand. So these are the first things that a reviewer would note down, would observe in the first detailed read. Okay. So in the second detailed read, because he has already gone through some important elements, now he would see some minor issues, because he has now been, you can say, satisfied with the overall quality of the paper. He is able to read it well. He is able to understand your work. Now he is going to see some other issues like typos, grammar, because these are minor issues. These are not important. I would say these are not important from the reviewer's point of view. Yes, they are important from a journal's point of view, from the editor's point of view. They are so important. But the reviewer's point of view, the main thing is overall quality of the paper. So now he would like to go for the detailed issues like typos, grammar. Have you made the journal format? Have you seen the journal format well? And you are actually, complying with the format of the journal. So it's very important that when you're writing a paper, you must take the formats, current formats from the journal website. I have found hard to work on Word, Microsoft Word, but when you are working on LaTeX, your job becomes so easy. So there are already predefined formats from the journal website. You can simply include those libraries, and then these formatting issues will automatically be solved when you're working on LaTeX format. So other issues, other minor issues like abstract, the details like tables, titles, figure titles, heading are properly written, and uppercase, lowercase, all those things we will now note down here. And then we will check out the references. So references are very important in your paper. References basically tell about the quality of your paper. If you have taken references mostly from conferences, and those conferences which are not well reputed, so your paper is not going to, he's straight away discouraged. The reviewer gets discouraged that the paper is citing that research that is not well acknowledged in the research community. So it's very important that you cite the papers from top journals. Also, you cite papers of those authors that are well known, highly cited. You are going to cite all those important authors. And then the references are latest. Please note down that your references should be latest. They should not be very old references. Like sometimes I see most of the, sometimes when a paper, see the authors sometimes cite the papers of 80s, 90s, early 2000. So it means that you are not working based on current status of your research area. So if you are citing latest research, latest journals, latest papers, it means you are working on state of the art. You are working on current state of your research area. So references are important. Make sure they are not more than 5 years old. For example, if it is 2020, your references should not be older than 2015. Okay, yeah, you can cite those papers which are basically fundamental. For example, if you are citing a paper for an equation that is introduced in 1980s, now you can cite the paper which introduced that equation, introduced that methodology in that particular period. Okay, if it is a fundamental, if it is a basis of your thesis, of your research, then you can cite. Okay, if even if it is older, but it is basically introducing that at that time. Because okay, uh, when writing about your paper, when commenting on your paper, now here's the time a reviewer is able to comment on your paper. He would like to write about positives of your research. You know, he can say that the paper is written well, the methodology is explained well, the results are novel, the methodology is presents major contribution. He can positively comment on your research. He can also then write about some shortcomings, highlight some shortcomings, limitations of your paper. For example, he can say that the figures are not, all the figures are not referenced, or you can say that headings are not properly written, or you can say that references are older, and all those things. You can highlight the shortcomings of your paper. Another, he would then also highlight the area of revision. Maybe he can highlight that your results are not clearly explained. So it means that he is talking about results. We should focus on research. We should revise our results. If he is talking about the gap, research gap is not well highlighted. So it means he's talking about introduction session. Now we go to introduction section, and we try to see where we have talked about research gap, research problem, and now we need to revise that to clearly explain the research gap. Okay, I can also talk about that the research limitations are not explained. Research limitations or shortcomings are not highlighted. So it means he's talking about conclusion section. So we go to the conclusion section, and there we talk about the limitations of our research. So every research has certain limitations. For example, if I have worked on data classification and my data is numerical, it means my methodology is at the moment limited to numerical data. For other types of data, the methodology is yet to be analyzed, yet to be applied. So this is the limitation of my research. Or if I'm taking some data for a particular country, for Malaysia, for example, so it means that the limitation of my research is that it is not representing whole Southeast Asia, it is only representing Malaysia. So this research can be extended by taking data from multiple Southeast Asian countries. So this is basically limitations. So now he is able to write some major comments. So you may find out that a reviewer is saying that this is an engaging article with robust methodology that hopefully questions, that purposefully questions our knowledge of this subject. So this is positive note. It means that your methodology is very well explained. You answer the questions that are highlighted in the introduction section. Now he is trying to highlight some limitations, shortcomings. So he says that, however, the representation of results is somewhat confusing, which means uh, our results maybe are not interrelated. We have not established relationship between the figures, between the tables, between the outcomes. So there is some shortcoming in the explanation of the results. And then he says, and the readability of the discussion could be improved. So when we are discussing our results, so we are not basically maybe we have some we need to improve uh, discussion section by maybe putting some clarity, maybe establishing some relationship between the arguments, between the claims that we have made, and establishing some context with the introduction and research gap that we have highlighted earlier in our research. And then further he says, addressing both these issues will make this paper more impactful. So this is basically a very nice comment. He is appreciating your research, and then he is highlighting something that you can work further on in the revision cycle, so that later on the reviewer can again see your paper and check whether you have already addressed those issues. So now we talk about important elements of a research paper. So a research paper has 6 important elements. Number 1 is title. As you can see, it's abstract, introduction, methodology, results and discussion, and conclusion. You can clearly see that I have not mentioned about literature review. See, we are not talking about literature review here. Literature review is not as important as these 6 elements are. So we can literature review can be improved. The reviewers do not put much interest on the literature review. They put much interest on methodology, on results, and on conclusion. Then they try to see abstract and introduction. Then in the title. Okay, so these are the key elements, and out of these key elements, the most important are methodology and results. We should make sure that our methodology is explained according to the established scientific rules, scientific traditions, scientific terminologies. Okay, we are not explaining our methodology in a vague manner. It should be scientifically explained. Results should be scientifically explained, to make your research contribution more robust. Okay, the title is something which is most read part of your research. So whenever I Google, I turn on Google Scholar and type data classification, I find out hundreds of titles. So among those titles, your title is also there. So this is the most important thing of your research for the reader's point of view, and also for the reviewer's point of view. So a reader would get into your paper, would download your paper, would read your paper if he finds the title convincing enough for him that answers his question. So title is important. So title, what we need to ask ourselves when we are writing a title. So we need to ask that, does it represent Does it represent your work? Okay. Does it represent your work? Does it include key features of your work? If you're working on classification, does it explain classification? If you're working on uh, like construction, something in construction industry, does it explain? Does it include those keywords which are used in construction? You know, does it sound interesting? It should also sound interesting. It shouldn't be very dry. It should be sounding interesting. It can be a question. It can be a question that you're answering. It can be a statement. It can be a methodology. So it should be interesting. If it is interesting, it will encourage your reader. It will encourage your reviewer. It will also encourage the editor to further process your paper in a quick manner. So, but it doesn't mean that we should include catchy words, non-scientific phrases. Please don't use uh, non-scientific words or phrases. They don't really make your title interesting. They would rather make your title uh, discouraging for the reviewers, also for the readers. So it should not violate the scientific rules. The importance of scientific rules, because we are writing a scientific research. We are not writing a story. We are not writing a novel. We are not writing a news article. We are writing a research paper. That is a scientific contribution. That is a scientific work. So also uh, it should not include acronyms. For example, sometimes people write that uh, uh, ABC methodology for DBF problems. Now, who does know that what is ABC, what is DBF? When reading a title, how would a reader know what those acronym means? So you should never include acronyms in the title. You can later on introduce those acronyms in the abstract, in the introduction, in your paper later on, but not in the title. Your title should clearly write down the full words, full forms of acronyms. If the acronym is that term is quite longer, is long enough, then you can write down some alternative word that summarizes that whole, you know, that whole term, or that represents that term. Okay. So what are the important elements in a title? It should include methodology. It should include problem. Also, it should include scope of your research. These are the three things. If you're writing a title, please note down. Does it include methodology? Does it talk about the problem? Is it clearly showing the scope of the research? So these are the main elements. Okay. So here I would like my friends who are attending this talk, I would like to ask them to please, when you are after this talk, when you are working on your workstations, please try to search 10 papers from Q1 journals, not those uh, low quality journals, from high quality journals. try to find out 10 to 20 papers and take an Excel sheet, write down the title, okay, just copy and paste the title, and then on the other column write down your comments. I want your comments on, does it include methodology, that does it include problem, does it include scope of the research, or it has some shortcoming, or it has some problem. So I want my friends to please note down the title and the and your comments after this talk, not now, after this talk, whenever you are free, so you can write down uh, in an Excel sheet the title and your comments. I would like to hear from you. I would like to know what do you think for different titles. And then abstract. The other part is a reviewer is going to read is abstract. Also readers after finding out your title quite interesting, they would now click on your title, and if it is, even if it is not open access paper, they will at least read the abstract. The reviewer also reads the abstract carefully, because this is the main section that is going to establish initial knowledge about your paper. Okay, so does it match your core research area? An abstract talk about your core research area. It should not be talking about something else, okay, out of scope, out of your research. It should not be talking about anything out of your research. It should be strictly talking about core research area of your paper, okay, key research points of your paper. Does it include summary of your work? So it should also include summary. So does it include the research question that is being answered, that is being addressed in our research? Does it highlight methodology? Does it outline the methodology? Okay, is methodology outlined? Does it represent results and conclusion very well? So a brief of everything should be in the abstract. So it is basically a summary of your work. It is not conclusion. Don't confuse it with the conclusion. Conclusion is not summary. Conclusion is outcome. Okay, but abstract is summary. Okay, sometimes I find that abstract and conclusion are written almost similar. No, abstract should talk about summary of your work, and conclusion should talk about outcome of your work. Okay, so as we can see here, I have a sample of a paper which is taken from pattern recognition. It is I think Q1 journal. Okay, the paper title says two-stage knowledge transfer framework. Two-stage knowledge transfer framework. So this is methodology for image classification. This is what? Problem. Okay, and the area of research is classification. So when we go back, it includes methodology, it includes problem, which is image classification, and then it includes scope of research, which is classification, data classification. The title includes all those three major elements. And now we would like to see the abstract. Now you see how the author starts the abstract. He says that the two-stage strategy has been widely used in image classification. So in image classification, he is basically talking about two-stage strategy. So this is the core research area, the broader research area is image classification, but the core research area is two-stage strategy. See, this is his core research area. So, however, these methods barely take the classification criteria of the first stage into consideration in the second prediction stage. So, this is the problem. This is the research question. Initially, he talked about core research area, then he talked about the research question. Okay, so we can see here abstract. It represents research question. It represents core research area. Now we would like to see, does it outline the methodology? Okay, in the green highlighted text, we can see that in this paper we propose a novel two-stage representation method. Here you can see uh, he is introducing acronyms. Okay, TSR. He did not use TSR in the title. He used TSR in the abstract. This is the right way to introduce acronyms later on in your research, not in the title. And later on says, and convert it to a single teacher, single student problem in our two-stage knowledge transfer framework for image classification. So he is basically, in this green highlighted text, he is talking about methodology. Specifically, the first stage classifier is formulated as the teacher, which holds the get value to supervisor, the student. In the second stage, uh, and then to transfer knowledge from the teacher classifier, we seek nearest neighbors of the test sample to generate a set of candidate target classes in the first stage. So see, he is step by he is highlighting, basically he is highlighting steps which are taken in the methodology of this research. So it is quite nicely explained methodology. And then in the gray highlighted text, he talks about the results, outcome of the paper. In actuality, the proposed framework generates a stronger classifier by staging two weaker classifiers in a novel way. So this is our contribution. The experiments on several databases show that our proposed framework is effective, which outperforms multiple popular classification methods. So this is our conclusion. What is the conclusion? Conclusion is our method outperforms other popular classification methods. Okay, so you can see here it includes all those important elements in abstract. Now we move to introduction section. Okay, before moving to the introduction section, I would also request my friends to again go to your, when you are free after this talk, when you are free, go to your Excel sheet. Also comment on the abstract of the paper that you have read. You can find 10 to 15 papers, good enough. Please write down some comments. What do you find in those comments, in those abstracts? And then you can email me on my email address that I already showed you in the title slide. Okay. Okay, now we move to introduction section. Okay. In introduction section, again we are going to ask few questions to ourselves. Does it introduce the scope of the research, topic of the research? Okay. Does it explain the importance, sorry, it should be importance. Does it explain the importance of current work? So importance of current work is always explained when you're talking about gap, research gap, or when you're talking about problem. Like in that abstract, if we see in the abstract, the gap is, it says that the these methods barely take classification criteria of the first into consideration in the second prediction stage. So this is research gap. This is research problem, that this is research question that you are going to answer. So it should clearly explain the research gap. Also, uh, does it explain the research question very well? Again, is there adequate background of the context from existing literature? Now, here you have to cite some relevant papers, some relevant research papers that are close to your context. The reviewer is going to see what papers you have cited, what existing work you have cited. Are you talking about uh, current work that is already published in quality journals? Are you talking about, is your work based on the current status of research? It means you are not, if you highlight some, if you talk about some old work, then it means your research is not relevant. Or if you have cited here some irrelevant papers, it means your introduction is quite poor. You're talking about something else, but you're not talking about your work. Okay, so does it maintain cone approach? So introduction should always maintain a cone approach, means it should initially talk broader perspective, then towards the end of introduction you should narrow down your talk, your discussion to your research question, and then you can introduce your methodology, that now to solve this problem we are going to propose this methodology, or we are in this paper we are going to address this question in this particular method. So it should explain, your introduction should be in a cone manner, in a cone approach, first broader, then narrow to your research question. Okay, it should also make sure that you define some important terms, specialized terms in your introduction section. Introduction section should introduce all those important terms that you are going to use later on in the paper. All those terms that you have used in the methodology, in the results or other of your work. Also, uh, please make sure that all the acronyms are introduced. Most of your acronyms are introduced in the introduction section. So sometimes I see that in papers people write down acronyms without its full form. So when you are writing an acronym, in the first place you should write down its full form, and in the later you can use the acronym only. Okay, so what are the key elements of an introduction section? So it should clearly explain the background. Okay, background of your research means the broader knowledge of your work. Then it should explain the importance of your work, means narrow down core importance of your work. Then it should explain the goals, objectives, research question of your research. So you can see these three elements are basically using cone approach: background, importance, and then goal of your work. Okay, so what reviewers are actually looking for in your introduction section? They are basically looking for connectivity of arguments. All those arguments that you have made, do they have relevance? Do they have relationship with one and each other? Do they have connectivity? It's very important to use those words which establish connectivity. For example, however, therefore, in this context, all these connecting words. You should use connecting words to write down your introduction, and also clearly uh, uh, break your introduction section into proper paragraphs. So first paragraph, maybe first 1 or 2 paragraphs will explain broader knowledge of your research. Then the second paragraph will talk about core area of research. Then third paragraph will talk about the goals of your research. And maybe in the fourth paragraph, you explain your methodology and all those things that are going to do in your work. So it should be clearly broken into paragraphs, and paragraphs should not be longer enough. Make sure the paragraph is not very much long that it is hard to read. Your context of your arguments should be broken into smaller and nicer paragraphs that the reader is able to read and understand step by step, one by one, properly in a good manner. So it should clearly explain the purpose of your research, why you are interested in this research. So you should mention clearly in the introduction section. Also, the reviewer is trying to observe logical progression. Okay, logical progression of current knowledge. It means how how you are connecting how you are connecting logically existing work and your work. Okay, there should be authentic logic behind it. So what's new in your work? So they would like to see why you are doing this and what new contribution are you going to make in the in your paper. So is it the case that you are going to reinvent the wheel? So you should not be reinventing the wheel. You should be explaining in a way that your contribution is new, and it should be concise. It should not be like talking and talking and talking and talking a huge introduction section. No, it should be concise. It should be brief, and it should talk about major contributions. Now methodology. So methodology, does it have concept of validity and reliability? So when you're talking about methodology, make sure that you are also talking about validity and reliability. How you are going to validate your research, how you are going to show reliability of your work, of your proposed methodology. So these are the two important things. If you are showing validity, your data is valid, your methodology is established from established or derived from already published works, then it is reliable, it is valid. Okay, how you have collected data, where from you have collected data, have you collected data from reliable sources? Okay, so the sources are very important. If you have collected data from reliable sources, then they are not going to question any reliability of the data. But if you have collected yourself, then they are going to question a lot of things. Okay, how do you validate that your data? How do you explain that the data is valid? Have you taken appropriate measures to confirm the validity of the data? If you have taken samples yourself, what is the measures, what is the criteria that you have taken to show the reliability of the data? Okay, can data be generalized? For example, when when I am writing a paper on image classification, like previously, image classification for medical image classification. So if I am taking images of for example chest, so can my methodology be applied to other medical images? Okay, so can we generalize the data? Means if you have applied uh, methodology on numerical classification for a stock exchange. For example, for particular country. So it means that we can apply the data of other country on our research. So is there any inclusion and exclusion criteria? Have you already pre-processed your data? If the data is not pre-processed, then they are going to question how you have applied the data. You have partitioned the data, you have very well, cleaned the data. Have you explained all those things in your methodology? Okay. So our methodology diagrams clearly explain. So diagrams are very important. Your diagrams should always match the explanation that you have made. It should not be like diagram is showing something and your explanation is talking about something else. Okay. So all those elements you have shown in the diagram are also clearly explained in the methodology section. Okay. Also, is your methodology reproducible? So if I try to implement your research, can I follow your methodology and reproduce the research? So it should be, you should ask yourself, is my methodology good enough, clearly written, that if other reader is trying to simulate, you can easily simulate my work. Okay. Okay. Have you taken appropriate evaluation measures? Okay, matrix, what are the scientific matrix used in our research? Have you taken all those appropriate measures? For example, for prediction, there are other measures. For classification, there are other measures. So it's very important that you have taken all those important measures. So important elements of methodology is your data, is methodology of your proposed framework or proposed technique or proposed method, and evaluation criteria. Okay. You should note down that in the methodology, you should mention all these three things: data, methodology, and then evaluation criteria. So what a reviewer is going to see in your methodology? He is basically going to see, can we see same results if reproduced? For example, if I apply the same methodology on the same data, can I produce the same results? Because sometimes reviewers are very well experienced. In the quality journals, the reviewers are so experienced, they have reviewed already hundreds of papers, they know much, they know how can we reproduce this particular methodology. So they are very well experienced. They know, when they read your methodology, they can easily understand that whether it is reproducible or not. Okay. Does it include established practices? So your methodology should not introduce something out of the box. Okay. If you are introducing something new, totally new, it should be based on existing research. It should be validated from the existing research. Okay. So mostly our methodology follows the established practices. In, for example, data classification, we have certain established practices, we just follow them. Does the methodology match uh, the title and introduction sections? So we have really talked the same in the title and introduction about the methodology, or the title is talking about something else and methodology is talking about something else. It should not be like this. So evaluation measures, appropriate evaluation measures are used, and there should not be intentional or unintentional bias. So if there is any bias, you should explain it in your research. Okay. So a research cannot be 100% unbiased. It cannot be 100% unbiased. There is always some percentage of biasness. Okay, so you can, if you are clear about the biasness, you should clearly explain it in the paper so that the reader, the reviewer is able to understand, okay, this methodology has certain bias, certain limitations. So the reader, the author has already explained it, so there is no problem. Okay, in results. Okay, results are, you can say, the outcome of your work. Results are outcome of your work. So it's very important that you explain them very well. So statistical significance, statistically analyzed results are the most reliable results. So results are based on methodology, and one thing important, tables and figures in the results section. You should always uh, you should always uh, you know uh, uh, check if the tables and figures are clearly placed. All the tables and figures are referenced in the results section. Sometimes we say that some tables are given, but they are not referenced in the section, in the result section. They are not talked about. So you should talk about every figure and table that you have presented in the result section. So uh, and then you should use standardized standards of rounding figures, units, standard units. For example, if you are rounding figure with two decimal points, your all figures should, your all numbers should be rounded by 2-digit points. Okay, if you are rounding for 4-digit points in a table, then all those numbers should be 4-digit points. So please mention, can note down that your each table should have some unanimity for formal representation. So what are the key elements in the results section? Those key elements are tables and figures. Okay, size of the table and size of the figures is very important. Sometimes the figure size is too large, that it covers the whole page. uh, it can be reduced, but it is to cover the page, it is intentionally enlarged, which is inappropriate. Sometimes the figure is too small to read. Okay, so you should consider the readability of the tables and figures. Okay, your figures and your results should be statistically explained, statistically analyzed, and you should always adhere to scientific conventions of representing or presenting or explaining the results. Okay, so reviewers would always look for, are the tables and figures referenced in the results section? There is no repetition of details. For example, you are not repeating uh, results again and again. If you are finding out the same results for multiple data, you can use alternate words. You can use alternate synonyms for explaining the results. Okay, figures, and your figures and tables should always show some relationship. You are establishing a relationship between the tables and figures in your explanation of the results. When you are explaining the results, you should establish that this figure and this table show that this is the outcome. Okay, is there appropriate sequence? So you should, in your experiments, there is always a sequence. So you should explain the results in a sequential order. You first process the result, process the data, then you applied the methodology, then you calculated outcomes, and then all these sequence should be properly explained. And now conclusion, the last last element is conclusion. Now conclusion, as I said before, it should be outcome of the research. It should not be summary of your work. It should be outcome. So it should explain how results main aim of research is addressed. Okay. Okay. In the conclusion, we should explain that we have addressed the research gap that we have already identified in the introduction section. Okay, so you may include your own suggestions, your own findings. Uh, uh, it should accurately uh, explain major outcomes, not every outcome, because every outcome is already explained in introduction in results section. So in the conclusion section, you will summarize the outcomes, and then you will write down the major outcomes. Okay. Also, it is important to highlight some limitations of your work. There is always a limitation of particular work, so you should know what are the limitations of your work. Okay. So you can always suggest further research, further extension of your work, that if somebody else wants to extend your work, he can or she can apply on other data, other samples, so he can extend your work on for future. So what are the key elements of conclusion? Your key findings, limitations, and future work. So reviewer would like to see uh, the conclusion is evidence based. So evidence is given in the results section. So we have to conclude based on evidence provided in the results section. Okay. Are the stated aims addressed in the discussion, and limitation and future works highlighted properly? Is there clear conclusion? Okay. Okay. Now the other point of our work, there's, I think, not more than 5 minutes. I will not take more than 5 minutes. We are about to finish our talk. So uh, weaknesses. So based on previous discussion, we can now clearly see that what are the strengths of our paper. Our strengths of our paper is clarity. Have we clearly explained introduction, methodology, and results? Uh, have we considered scientific conventions in our paper? Is our paper grammarly very well written? So is our results or methodology measurable, realistic enough? We are not talking about something which is not realistic. Unrealistic should not be discussion. Should not be part of your research. It should be clearly and realistically talking about your research work. Okay. Latest and relevant references. It is very important. If you are targeting a particular journal, you should note, you should cite some papers from that journal. It is an important tip I would like to give you, that if you are targeting a particular journal, then you should cite some papers from that journal. Okay, some important papers from that journal. Maybe you can also explore who is the editor, who is the who are the reviewers, who is the in the editorial team. So you can cite their papers. That will strengthen your work. Also, avoid grammatical mistakes, avoid vagueness uh, of purpose. Your purpose of research should be very well clearly explained. Okay, it should not have lack of novelty. Results should not be overstated, over explained, over exaggerated. You should not include old references. Take care of the format of the journal. Okay, and also scope of the journal. Okay, there is based on previous discussion, now we can say that if we want to write a convincing paper for the reviewer, then we should adhere to scientific rules, because a reviewer would always try to see whether the paper is scientifically sound enough. Even if it has grammatical mistakes or some other mistakes, he can accept it. He can give you some comments, okay, or he or she can give you some comments. But if it is scientifically good enough, then the reviewer is likely to accept your paper, okay, with some minor revisions, with some major revisions maybe, okay. So to avoid rejection, please check out the scope of the journal. It's very important that the journal you are targeting, please check out the scope. If it is out of the scope, the editor will straight away reject your paper because it is out of the scope of the journal. You have cited relevant work, okay, and the methodology is clearly explained. Grammatic irritating issues are like uh, readability issues, okay. Figures are too small, tables are broken into two pages without proper breaking, uh, numbers are inappropriately written without any uniformity. So these are irritating for the reviewer. Straight away, it's very difficult for the reviewer to further analyze your paper. He will then reject your paper. Okay, he or she will reject your paper. Okay, so for responding to reviewers' comments, when you receive the comments, okay, please note down that reviewers' comments are important for our paper. Okay, it never matters if they have given you major revisions or they have given you minor revisions. So revisions are always revisions, no problem. If they have given you major revisions, try to break down the revisions. For example, if they are talking about methodology, break it, write it down separately on a separate paper, that on methodology these are shortcomings, on the results these are shortcomings. For example, if you are receiving reviews from three reviewers and three reviewers talk about methodology in different way, so you can group those comments uh, with related to methodology, and group those comments related to results, group those comments related to introduction section. So you can, when you are break those comments, then you can step by step address these comments. So initially try to resolve the easiest ones, okay. For example, if there are some grammar issues, some formatting issues, and you try to resolve those all issues that are easy to solve, so that you feel a sense of accomplishment, you feel a sense of achievement, that you have achieved something for the reviewers, you have addressed something for the reviewers. Then later on you can go for the major issues, okay. So when you are responding to reviewers' comments, you please appreciate their time and efforts, okay? Because they have done it without any charges, okay? Most of the reviewers, they are reviewing papers voluntarily. They are doing their job, and this is the additional job they are doing for you, okay? They are not bound to review your paper, but if they are reviewing, we should be appreciating their time and efforts, and make sure that you address all the issues highlighted by the reviewers, even if it is a minor issue, even if it is a major issue, okay. You must respond to all the issues highlighted by the reviewers, okay. Here, thank you so much. I hope I have not taken too much time, even though I have taken much time, but not too much, I hope. So now I would like to invite questions.
Thank you so much, Doc. We really appreciate your time. Yeah, we do not mind that you had to take so much time. We learned a lot from you. Thank you so much for your time. So we'll just wait for like a minute or two so that people can send in their questions. Please, to the listeners, if you have any questions, please send in your questions into the chat box. Yes, please. So while we wait for for questions. Doc, in the beginning of the session, you mentioned that the references should be very recent. You know, there are cases where some things are like okay, quite old, like you have to reference them. Like, what percentage of that is allowed? What percentage of like probably old papers are you allowed to reference?
You can say 10%, maybe maximum.
Okay.
Yeah, those which are basically fundamentally fundamental. Those references that are related to fundamentals of your work. If you are talking about some fundamentals, then you can always reference to the old research. But mostly your research should be based on current work.
Um, Thank you so much for that. I also have one more question. So if, for instance, something is regarded in that field that you're working on, if something is regarded as, for instance, general knowledge, like this thing is known, everybody knows, for instance, that we breathe in oxygen, for instance. So if I want to use that kind of information, or anybody wants to use that kind of information, does it need to be referenced? Obviously, that is not your own research. It is something that is generally known. But how do you reference such things?
Yes, you're right. You're right. We don't need to cite that. We don't need to reference that because it is already established fact. For example, when sun rises, there is light. Okay, we don't need to cite it. Everybody knows it. So when something is too much already established fact, everybody knows it. So you don't need to cite it. Important thing is when you're talking, when you're writing your paper, when you're discussing something, so whatever the arguments or claims you're making, it should be backed by a reference. Okay, it should be supported by a reference. Your major argument, your major discussion, your major content, your major argument should be referenced by, should be supported by a reference.
Okay, thank you, Doc. There are some questions in the chat room, so I will read the first one to you. This is from Hazik. He says that for the specialization term in introduction part, should we explain in detail or should we roughly mention it in the introduction?
Sorry, could you please read down again?
He says that for the specialization term in introduction part, should we explain in detail or should we roughly mention it in the introduction?
Excellent. So basically, introduction section is introduction of your work. Okay. Specialization terms or specialized terms, you can simply introduce them. Okay. Then later on in your methodology, in your further work, you can explain them later. But it's better to at least introduce those terms, majority of those terms, in your introduction section, because think about from reader's point of view. If you are a reader and you are reading a paper, and when you are reaching out the methodology section, suddenly you are introduced with some difficult terms. Okay, suddenly you are introduced with a lot of specialized terms. Would you be able to grab those terms very well? So it is better if you are introduced in the introduction section with these specialized terms, then later on you can explain them in your work. So it's always a good practice to let the reader introduce all the important elements of your research in the introduction section.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Thank you so much for that. The next question says that why do editors reject a manuscript if the paper scope is related to the journal scope?
Thank you for this question. I don't know if the paper is according to the scope of the journal. It should not be rejected. However, if it has some other minor issues, I would say formatting issues or references are not relevant, because an editor, what an editor sees, an editor would see your title, would see your references, okay, because he doesn't have time. He would straight away he would initially scrutinize the paper, and then he will decide whether he is going to assign a reviewer or he is going to reject straight away. So he would see from the title, he would see the reference, the scope of the, he would match the scope of your paper with the scope of the journal, and then he would see the references. If the references are taken from the journals that are, that are not related with the scope of the journal you are targeting, so it's very important that your references should also be taken from the same journal you are targeting. It's very important, so that the editor is encouraged that you have taken you have taken the basis of your research from the research that is already published in my journal. So your references are important and your title is important.
Thank you so much. We have 3 more questions, then we can round up. The next question says that how can a person prepare methodology for a review paper since there are no experiments?
Thank you for this question. I have written a review paper which is cited more than 100 times. A review, systematic literature review has a methodology, established methodology. If you email me, then I can show you my paper where you can see the methodology, where I have discussed the systematic literature review methodology in detail. I have also cited some existing research methodologies for literature review. So there is always a methodology for review, systematic literature review. So for example, in a systematic literature review, you are first of all, in that methodology, you are first of all selecting the publishing venues, then you are explaining about scrutinizing the papers that you have found. It means inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then on what basis, what research questions you are going to answer in that particular review. So a review paper must always answer a question. When it answers a question, so your answer is based on particular methodology. So I would encourage you to please email me on my email, that is usitsoft@hotmail.com. So I will show you, I can also guide you how to write a review paper.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Question 1, I will read the 2 questions because it's by the same questioner. So question 1, it says that, is it okay to use the word we inside the paper? For example, we proposed, we mentioned, we have shown in figure X, Y, Z. That's the first question. Then the second question, it says, what are the minimum number of references to be used in a paper? Because I have seen some papers with only 6, 8 references. Can we rely on the research in that paper?
One question is about minimum number of references. Another question, yes, please. Yes. Would you like to read out again? I'm sorry,
I didn't. The first question says that, can we use the word we, like pronoun we, inside the paper? For instance, to say that in this work we propose, or in the section 5 we have mentioned that, or we have shown in figure XYZ. Can we use the pronoun we? The pronoun we.
Yeah, of course, no problem, no problem. Yes, yes, you can do it. Yes. Okay. For the first question, yes, we can use we. It's no problem because you have done a research, and you can use the pronoun we. We have done this. We have done this. We have found this. We would like to suggest this. We would like to highlight some limitations. So you can always use we, no problem. Even if you are a single author, it's better use author. Authors would like to say this, author would like to conclude. So no problem with it, no problem. And then about minimum number of references, for computer science papers, what I have found, if it is a full length paper, it should at least include 30 to 60 references. 30 to 60 references. Yes, I have found papers which include 10 to 12 references. So you can, but I think they are not published in reputable journals. So reputable journals will always try to see, have you established background of your work? If you have established background of your work, it means you have cited ample number of references from which are relevant and which are latest. So a scientific paper, a computer science paper, should include at least 30 to 60 references.
This question just came in, and I think let's just entertain it as the last question we'll be answering today. It says that, please, I would like to know, can we introduce methodology in our abstract? Yes.
Of course, why not? Why not? So I mentioned in the slide. If you go to slide when I was talking about abstract, it should clearly outline the methodology. What methodology have you used to conduct this research? Okay, outline, not explain, outline, simply outline. We have done this, we have done this, we have done this, we have done this. How we have done this, it should be later explained in the methodology section. How in the methodology, but what in the introduction, in the abstract. So no problem, in the abstract we can always, we must outline the methodology of our research.
Okay, Doc, thank you so much, Jazakumullah khairan, for your time and your attention. We have learned so much from you, and I believe our listeners as well have also learned a lot. We do hope that next time, if we call on you, you'll be willing to answer us. And for those of us listening that want to email him or have any other question for him, I posted his email in the chat room, so you can use the email, you can mail him, ask him any question. I'm sure he'll be willing to answer you. So once again, thank you so much for your time. And with that, we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining this session. I'm always available for any assistance. My friends in Malaysia, everywhere in the world, I have already been collaborating with researchers from Egypt, from Mexico, from China, from Malaysia. So you're always welcome to collaborate, to work. I would be very much happy to help and assist my friends. So we will always learn from each other. Thank you so much for inviting me. UTP, thank you so much. Mr. Gali and Ms. MC, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. Bye.